For most of my childhood, I had the quiet feeling of being slightly out of place. Not in an obvious way. My parents never said I wasn't part of the family. My sister and I grew up in the same house, went to the same schools, sat at the same dinner table every night. But there were small patterns. My sister's plans usually became the family's plans. If she wanted to go somewhere, everyone rearranged things. If she had a problem, it became urgent. When I had a problem, people listened politely and then changed the subject. I didn't resent it back then. I just adapted. I became the practical one. The person who handled things quietly, booking travel, fixing paperwork mistakes, figuring out how to deal with customer service calls when something went wrong. My parents even joked about it sometimes. "You're the organized one," my mom would say. At the time, it sounded like praise. What it really meant was that whenever something complicated came up, they expected me to deal with it. My sister never had to learn how. The moment everything shifted started with something small, a disagreement about money my sister had borrowed from me and hadn't returned. It wasn't a huge amount, but it had been months, and I finally asked about it during dinner. I thought it would be a simple conversation. Instead, it turned into an argument. My sister got defensive immediately. She said I was being dramatic over something minor. My parents jumped in quickly, telling me it wasn't worth creating tension over. I remember sitting there trying to explain that it wasn't really about the money. It was about the pattern. That's when my sister leaned back in her chair and said something that changed the atmosphere in the room. "You know what your problem is," she said. "You act like you belong here more than you actually do." The table went quiet. I waited for someone to tell her that was too far. Instead, my father sighed and said something even stranger. "Well, sometimes it does feel like you're always criticizing this family." My mother nodded slightly. The words hung there for a moment before my sister said the sentence that stayed with me long after. "You don't even belong in this family." And my parents didn't correct her. My dad said, almost casually, "Maybe if you didn't treat everything like a problem, you'd fit in better." It wasn't shouted. That made it worse, because it sounded like something they had quietly believed for a long time. I didn't argue after that. There was nothing left to argue about. That night I went to my room and sat there for a long time, replaying the conversation in my head. Not the argument itself, but the way my parents had agreed so easily. The next few weeks felt strangely calm. I stopped inserting myself into family discussions. Stopped offering help when something needed fixing. Stopped reminding them about appointments or helping with bills online. Nobody noticed right away. Then I moved out. It wasn't dramatic. I found a small apartment across town and told them a few days before I left. My mother seemed surprised but didn't ask many questions. My father just said, "Well, maybe some space will help." My sister barely looked up from her phone. Life outside the house was quieter than I expected. At first the silence felt heavy. I kept waiting for someone to call and talk about what had happened. But nobody did. Weeks passed. Then months. Occasionally my mom would text about practical things, mail that arrived at the house, or asking where certain documents were stored. The old pattern continued in small ways. They still contacted me when they needed help figuring something out, but the conversation stayed surface level. No one ever mentioned that night. Eventually I stopped expecting them to. Almost a year later, I saw photos on social media of a family vacation. My parents and my sister had gone to Mexico. Bright beaches, smiling group photos, drinks by the pool. I wasn't surprised I hadn't been invited. By then, I had stopped imagining myself inside those kinds of pictures. A few days into their trip, I woke up one morning and saw my phone lighting up. 15 missed calls. All from my sister. There were also several voice messages. The first one sounded frustrated. "Hey, call me back when you see this." The next few were more urgent. Apparently something had gone wrong with their travel documents. They were having trouble with hotel reservations and couldn't access certain booking confirmations. It was the kind of logistical mess I used to fix all the time. In the last message, her voice sounded stressed. "Just call me. You're the one who understands all this stuff." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen. Part of me almost laughed, not because the situation was funny, but because it felt so familiar. They had spent years assuming I would handle problems quietly. Even after telling me I didn't belong, I didn't call back immediately. Instead, I went about my morning, made coffee, answered work emails, took a walk. The missed calls stayed on the screen. Eventually, I listened to the messages again. What struck me wasn't the urgency. It was the assumption. Not once did she acknowledge what had happened between us. Not once did she ask if I was willing to help. She simply expected that I would. That afternoon I called her back. Her relief was immediate. "Oh, thank God," she said. "We've been trying to figure this out all morning." I listened while she explained the situation. Then I gave her a few pieces of advice. Who to contact, which documents they needed, what steps to take with the hotel. But I didn't take over the situation the way I used to. I didn't start calling companies for them. I didn't log into accounts or start solving the problem myself. I just explained what they could do. The conversation ended quickly after that. Later that evening she sent a short text. "Thanks for the info. We figured it out." There was no apology. No mention of what she had said a year earlier. But something had shifted anyway. After that day, the calls from my family became less frequent. When they did reach out, the tone was different. More cautious, as if they understood, without anyone saying it, that my role in their lives had changed. For the first time, I wasn't the person quietly holding everything together. And strangely enough, that realization didn't feel sad. It felt like space I had finally learned how to keep.